Ambassador Wei walked into the Galactic Council chamber with a data pad clutched in her hands. The massive room stretched above her, designed to accommodate species of all sizes and shapes. They stood tall on their platforms, their four arms crossed in what passed for their neutral stance. The crystalline shard hung suspended in their environmental fields, refracting light into rainbow patterns across the walls. The collective's representatives sat in their pool chambers, their bodies shifting and flowing as they communicated among themselves. Had been Earth's representative for 3 years now, ever since humanity joined the Galactic Union. It had been 15 years since first contact, and humanity was still learning the complex dance of galactic politics. Today, she was about to ask for something that had never been requested before. The council speaker, an ancient being called a who resembled a floating collection of geometric shapes, addressed her. Ambassador, you requested this emergency session. The council is listening. Took a breath and activated her data pad. A hologram appeared above the center of the chamber. In 3 months, humanity will observe our Memorial Day. It is one of our most sacred traditions. We are requesting that all member species of the Galactic Union join us in a moment of silence during our ceremony. The chamber erupted in confusion. Various translation devices struggled to keep up with the multiple conversations happening at once. Commander of the stepped forward, his voice booming through the space. Silence, for what purpose? His translator made his confusion clear. Do humans wish us to observe a military victory? We can certainly honor a great battle. Shook her head. No, Commander, we wish to honor our fallen, all of them. Those who died in service to others, from ancient Earth history to those we lost last month in the colony accident on Europa. The shard delegate, who had introduced herself simply as Luminance, pulsed with a curious orange glow. You're fallen, but why commemorate death? Death is simply transition. We shard exist for thousands of your years. When one of us is shattered, the fragments join new formations. There is no death, only change. A representative rose from their pool, water streaming from their fluid body. The collective agrees with Luminance. When our physical forms expire, our consciousness transfers to the collective memory. We are never truly lost. Why do humans focus on loss instead of continuity? Had expected this. She had prepared for it. But standing here, facing beings who had never known death the way humans did, she struggled to find the right words. Because we are lost, she said quietly. When a human dies, they are gone. We have no consciousness transfer, no fragment reformation, no ascension to glory that we can prove. We have memories and we have grief, and we have the choice to remember or to forget. She paused, looking at each delegation. We choose to remember. The speaker's shapes rotated slowly. The council does not understand. Your request is for all species to stop their activities for this. Remembrance. For how long? 2 minutes, said. 120 seconds. Across all Union space, we ask that everyone stop. No ship movements, no trade, no military operations, no communication. Just silence. Just remembrance. Commander laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. 2 minutes. For the dead. Ambassador, the fleets do not stop. We honor our fallen by continuing to fight, by winning more battles in their names. To stop is to dishonor them. Then we dishonor them differently, replied, meeting his eyes. Commander, have you lost warriors in your service? Thousands, said proudly. Great warriors all. They fight now in the eternal battles of the afterlife. Do you know their names? The question hung in the air. His posture shifted slightly. The greatest warriors, yes. Their names are sung in our war chants. The greatest, repeated. What about the others? The ones who weren't the strongest or the bravest, but who showed up anyway, who did their duty even though they were terrified. Do you remember them? Said nothing. Turned to Luminance. You shard live for. You have been part of the Galactic Union for 800 years. How many shard have shattered in that time during Union service? Luminance's glow shifted to a contemplative blue, approximately 47,312. Can you name one of them? The blue deepened, became almost purple. The records exist. The information is stored. But you don't know their names, said. It wasn't a question. She looked around the chamber at all the species assembled. Humanity has been part of this union for 15 years. In that time, we have sent our people to serve alongside yours. Human engineers helped build the quantum gates that connect the outer systems. Human medical personnel worked on the plague that hit the colonies. Human soldiers fought beside warriors on the frontier worlds. The hologram above the chamber changed. Names began to appear, hundreds of them, thousands of them. These are the humans who have died in Union service since we joined, continued. 87,431 individuals, engineers who died when a gate collapsed, medical staff who contracted the diseases they were trying to cure, soldiers who never came home from the frontier, supply ship crews lost in jump space, colonists who died building the future. The names kept scrolling. The chamber had fallen silent. We remember them, said. All of them. Not just the heroes, not just the successful ones. All of them, because they served, because they tried, because they were ours and they are gone, and that matters. A small species called the who rarely spoke in council raised a tentacle. But Ambassador, if you remember all of them, how do you function? How do you move forward? The weight of such loss across your short lives must be crushing. Smiled sadly. It is crushing. That's why we have the ceremonies. That's why we stop everything for 2 minutes, because we need to acknowledge the weight. We need to feel it, or we forget what it costs. We forget that every name on that list was a person who laughed and loved and dreamed and hoped. We forget that they matter. The representative flowed forward. Your species is asking the entire Galactic Union to share your grief. Why should we? Because you have grief too, said. You just haven't stopped long enough to feel it. Every species here has lost members in Union service, who failed consciousness transfer during the solar flare incident on station, who disappeared in deep space patrols, Shard who were shattered in the mining accidents on the asteroid belt, who died in the terraforming disasters, who never returned from the dark matter research. She gestured to the hologram. I have the names, all of them, from every species. Would you like to see them? No one answered. I'm not asking you to understand human grief, said. I'm asking you to honor your own fallen. For 2 minutes, stop running forward long enough to look back. Acknowledge that they existed, that they served, that they are gone. That's all. Just 2 minutes of silence. The council speaker's shape spun faster. This is unprecedented. The council must deliberate. Of course, said. The ceremony is in 3 months. I hope you'll join us. As she walked out of the chamber, she could hear the debates beginning behind her. She didn't know if they would agree, but she had done what she came to do. She had planted the seed of an idea that humanity carried like a sacred burden, that the dead deserved to be remembered, not because they achieved great things, but because they lived and served, and that was enough. Behind her, Commander stood motionless, staring at the scrolling names. He was looking for something. After a long moment, he found it. Warrior Scout, he read quietly, died during Joint Human Patrol, Frontier Sector 7. He had known, they had trained together. He had not thought of in years. The names kept scrolling. So many names, so many he had forgotten. Luminance drifted closer to the hologram, her crystalline body catching and reflecting the light from the projected names. She saw shard names she recognized, colleagues from centuries past. They had shattered and she had moved on. She had not thought that moving on meant forgetting. The representative watched the water ripple in their tank. They were arguing among themselves, as the collective always did when faced with new concepts. But underneath the argument they felt something unfamiliar, a sense of absence where there should be presence. Memories of who had failed to transfer, whose last thoughts had been lost instead of added to the collective. They had considered those failures. They had not considered them losses. The chamber slowly emptied as delegates returned to their quarters to think, to debate, to feel things they had not allowed themselves to feel in a very long time. The hologram kept displaying names, would keep displaying them for days if left running. A testament to the cost of civilization, the price of progress, the weight of loss. Ambassador sat in her quarters and pulled out an old photograph. Her brother, a mining engineer, killed in an explosion on Ceres 5 years ago. She touched his face on the photo and whispered his name. David. She said it every day. She would say it during the ceremony. She would say it for the rest of her life. Because that's what humans did. They remembered, and they were about to teach the galaxy how to remember too. The next 3 months passed in a blur of diplomatic meetings. To his surprise, most species agreed to participate in the silence. Not all of them understood it, but they were willing to try. The Galactic Union had never done anything like this before, and the logistics were complicated. Ship captains had to be that all vessels would need to halt during the 2-minute period. Trade exchanges would pause. Military operations would suspend. Emergency services were exempt, of course, but everything else would stop. It was unprecedented, and many people across the galaxy were confused or annoyed by it. Human ships started arriving at Unity Station, the massive space station that served as the hub of the Galactic Union. They brought materials for the ceremony. Humans from every colony, every station, every ship that could spare crew members. They brought something the aliens had never seen before, a memorial wall. The wall was constructed in the Memorial Gardens, a section of Unity Station that had been used for various cultural displays. The humans built a structure of synthetic stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was black, deep and dark, and it stretched 50 meters long and 10 meters high. On this wall, they carved names. Every human who had died in Union service since first contact. The aliens watched in fascination as human engineers worked day and night to inscribe each name with precision and care. They used both laser etching and traditional hand carving techniques, making each name permanent, physical, real. Commander visited the wall while it was being constructed. He stood before it, his 4 arms hanging at his sides, and read the names. He found his name near the middle section. The human carver working on that section noticed him staring. "Did you know them?" the human asked. "Yes," said, "we served together." He was adequate. The human smiled gently. "High praise from I hear." "He died saving a human ship," said. "Your people were caught in a pirate ambush. Ship intercepted. He gave your crew time to escape." "Then he was a hero." "He was doing his duty." "Yes," the human said. "That's what makes him a hero. He could have run, he stayed." Stared at its name for a long time. "We believe our warriors ascend to fight eternally, but if that is true, why do I feel his absence? Why does seeing his name here make me feel less?" "Because he's gone," the human said simply. "And you miss him, that's okay. That's human, maybe it's two." The human returned to carving and stayed, watching the names appear. He began to recognize more. Warriors he had served with, fought beside, trained. They were all here, all remembered, all named. Luminance arrived at the wall a few days before the ceremony. She had brought something, a list of shard names. "I researched," she said to who was overseeing the final preparations. "I found the names of all shard who were shattered in Union service. I thought, perhaps they should be on the wall too." Felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yes, absolutely yes, we'll make room, we'll carve them all." "There are 47,312 names." "Then we'll carve 47,312 names," said firmly. "They served. They deserve to be remembered." Other species began to come forward with their lists. They brought their records of those who failed consciousness transfer. They brought names of their people lost to accidents. They provided data on their missing researchers. Species after species, each bringing their fallen to be remembered. The wall had to be expanded. Human engineers worked around the clock, adding sections, extending the memorial. It grew from 50 meters to 100, then 200. Names in dozens of languages, some requiring special carving techniques, some needing translation software to be inscribed properly. The memorial gardens transformed into something sacred. Aliens who had never understood the concept of a memorial began to visit, to look for names they recognized, to stand in quiet contemplation before the growing wall of the dead. A young warrior, barely past his training, found his commander's name on the wall. He had never known the commander had died in Union service. He had thought the commander simply retired. Seeing the name there, carved in stone, made it real in a way reports never had. He stood there for an hour, not moving, just staring. A elder brought their entire collective consciousness to the wall. They found names of who had been lost, forgotten, erased from memory because their consciousness never made it to the collective. They were individuals once, the elder said too. Before they could join us, they were individuals with hopes and fears. We forgot that. We forgot them. The wall became a place of pilgrimage. Aliens from all over the station came to visit, to read names, to remember or to learn about those they had never known. The humans had guards posted, not to keep people away, but to help them find names, to answer questions, to provide context. One guard, a young woman named Private Martinez, helped a small find the name of their sibling. They had been searching for 20 minutes, overwhelmed by the thousands of names. When they finally found it, they made a sound that the translator rendered as sobbing. I had forgotten, they said. I had allowed myself to forget. I told myself it was easier, but it wasn't easier, it was emptier. Martinez put a hand on the small shoulder. Now you remember, that's what matters, you remember. As the ceremony date approached, more ships arrived at Unity Station. Humans came from every corner of Union space. They came in military uniforms and civilian clothes. They came as veterans and as families of the fallen. They came to remember, and they came to teach others how to remember. The Galactic Council watched the preparations with something approaching awe. What had started as a simple request for 2 minutes of silence had become something much larger. The memorial wall was now a permanent structure, growing larger every day as more names were added. Species were sending representatives not out of diplomatic obligation, but because they wanted to be there. Commander approached a week before the ceremony. I have a request, he said. We would like to provide honor guards for the ceremony, if that is acceptable. Was surprised. Of course it's acceptable, it would be an honor. We do not understand your human grief, said carefully, but we understand duty. We understand sacrifice. We understand loss, though we have not called it that before. We would like to stand with you when you honor those who served. Thank you, Commander, said quietly. No, replied. Thank you, for reminding us that our dead deserve better than our forgetfulness, for showing us that strength is not just in moving forward, but in stopping to remember why we fight at all. Other species made similar offers. The Shard would provide ambient lighting, using their natural bioluminescence to create a solemn atmosphere. They would maintain the environmental systems in perfect silence. They would help organize the seating arrangements. They would ensure the communication blackout across Union space was properly coordinated. What had started as a human ceremony was becoming something shared by all, each species contributing in their own way, honoring their own fallen, but doing it together. The night before the ceremony, walked through the memorial gardens alone. The wall stretched before her, covered in names from dozens of species. She found her brother's name and traced it with her fingers. I think they're starting to understand David, she whispered. I think we're teaching them something important. She walked the length of the wall, reading names as she went. Human names she recognized. Alien names she was learning to pronounce. Each one a person, a being, a life that had ended in service to something larger than themselves. A shadow moved beside her, Luminance had arrived, her crystalline body glowing softly in the dark. "I have been alive for 4,217 of your years," she said. "In that time I have experienced much, but I have never experienced this. This weight, this knowing, this remembering." "It's heavy," said. "Yes," Luminance agreed. "But it is not unbearable, and it is not unwelcome. I had thought that living so long meant accumulating wisdom. Now I wonder if I have simply accumulated forgetting. You humans with your brief lives seem to understand something I missed, that every life matters, that every death diminishes us, that we must stop and acknowledge this or we lose something essential." "What do we lose?" asked. "Ourselves," Luminance said simply. "If we do not remember those who came before, if we do not honor those who sacrificed, if we do not acknowledge the cost of what we have built, then we forget why we built it at all. We forget that civilization is not measured in ships or technologies or territories. It is measured in the lives we protect, the sacrifices we honor, the memories we keep." They stood together in silence, two beings from worlds utterly different, united in the simple act of remembering. Above them, through the transparent dome of the memorial gardens, the stars shone down. Somewhere out there among those stars were the places where the named on the wall had died. And now, for the first time, the galaxy was preparing to remember them all. The day of the ceremony arrived. Unity Station's memorial gardens were packed with beings from across the galaxy. They stood in carefully organized sections by species, but the boundaries seemed less important now. Humans stood beside. Shard floated near tanks, mingled with. Dozens of other species filled every available space. The memorial wall dominated the space, its dark surface covered with names that seemed to go on forever. Guards stood at attention around the perimeter, and human together, a honor guard representing all who served. Ambassador stood at a podium facing the crowd. She wore her formal diplomatic uniform, but she had added something personal, a small photo of her brother pinned to her chest. Around her, she saw others had done the same. Humans wearing photos, medals, patches from the uniforms of their lost loved ones. The aliens had adopted this too in their own ways. Wore honor marks for fallen warriors. Shard had etched names into their crystalline bodies. Had streamed colors through their fluid forms that represented their lost members. "Thank you all for being here," began. Her voice was amplified across the garden and broadcast throughout the station. "Today we remember. That is all we ask. That is everything we need." She nodded to a group of human soldiers standing near the wall. They began to read names. One after another they called out the names of the fallen. Human names first, then alien names as other species joined in the reading. The voices echoed through the garden, a steady stream of remembrance. The crowd listened in silence. There was no fidgeting, no whispered conversations, no distractions. They simply stood and listened to the names. Thousands of names, tens of thousands. Commander stood at attention, his four arms at his sides. When he heard his name called out, something broke inside him. He had not cried since he was a child, considered tears a weakness. But he felt moisture on his face now, and he did not care. Had died 3 years ago and had not mourned him. He mourned him now. Luminance floated in her environmental field, her body pulsing with colors that represented deep emotion in Shard culture. She had thought herself beyond such feelings, immune to sentiment due to her long life. But as she heard the names of Shard she had known, had worked with, had considered friends before they shattered, she understood the human concept of grief. It was the price of connection, the cost of caring, and it was worth paying. A elder listened to the names of their people and felt the collective consciousness shift. They had always thought of themselves as individuals, but also as part of a greater whole. Now they understood that the whole was diminished by every loss, that consciousness transfer or not, something irreplaceable was lost when it died. The individual perspective, the unique combination of experiences and thoughts, could never be replicated. They had lost those individuals, and they had not acknowledged the loss. They acknowledged it now. The reading of names continued for an hour. Soldiers rotated in and out, their voices strong and clear despite the emotional weight. The crowd never wavered. They stood and listened, bearing witness to every name, every life, every sacrifice. Finally, a human general approached the podium. He was an older man, his uniform covered in medals and honors. But his eyes were red, and his voice shook as he began to speak. My name is General. 20 years ago, my daughter joined the Colonial Engineering Corps. She wanted to build things, to create, to help establish humanity's place in the stars. 15 years ago, she died when a support beam collapsed during construction on Ganymede Station. She was 23 years old. He paused, collecting himself. The entire garden waited with him. Her name was Sarah. She loved old Earth music and terrible puns. She was afraid of heights, which is ironic since she worked in space. She called me every week, even when she was exhausted from her shifts. She was kind and funny and brave, and she is gone. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze sweeping across all the species assembled. We do not remember our fallen because they were perfect. We remember them because they were ours, because they stood when they could have run, because they gave everything, asking nothing in return except that we continue, that we build the future they died creating, that we never forget the cost. His voice grew stronger. Every name on that wall represents a person, a being with hopes and dreams and fears, a being who laughed and loved and lived. They are not statistics. They are not acceptable losses. They are individuals, and they matter. They will always matter. He pulled a photo from his pocket. Sarah, young and smiling, making a silly face at the camera. This is my daughter. This is who I remember, not the engineer, not the casualty. Sarah, my little girl who never got to be old. He placed the photo at the base of the wall, among hundreds of others that had been left there. Flowers from Earth, crystals from Shard, colored waters in sealed containers from, honor tokens from, each species bringing their own traditions of remembrance to share. In a moment, we will observe 2 minutes of silence, General said. Across all Union space, every ship, every station, every colony will stop. We will stop our work. We will stop our wars. We will stop our rushing forward into the future. For 2 minutes, we will simply be. We will remember. We will honor those who cannot be here. He stepped back from the podium, took his place. The silence will begin with a signal broadcast across all Union channels, she said. It will end the same way. During this time, think of someone you lost. Say their name, if only in your mind. Remember them. That is all we ask. That is everything. She nodded to the communication station. A tone rang out, broadcast across 300 systems, reaching every corner of Union space. And the galaxy fell silent. On Unity Station, thousands of beings stood motionless. In the memorial gardens, not a sound could be heard except the gentle hum of life support systems. The humans stood with tears streaming down their faces. The stood at attention, many experiencing grief for the first time in their lives. The Shard glowed with colors of mourning. The stilled their waters. The ceased all movement. The stopped their constant geometric shifts. Across space, ships drifted in silence. Massive cargo vessels hung motionless in their shipping lanes. Military fleets ceased their patrols. Research stations went dark and quiet. Trading posts stopped their constant flow of goods and information. Emergency services remained alert but silent, ready but still. On Earth, billions of humans stopped what they were doing. They stood in parks and homes and offices. They stood on streets and in fields and on ships. They remembered. Parents remembered children. Children remembered parents. Friends remembered friends. Soldiers remembered fallen comrades. Workers remembered colleagues. Humanity remembered its dead as it had done for thousands of years. But now, for the first time, the galaxy remembered with them. Commander stood in the gardens and thought of. He remembered the young warrior's eagerness, his determination to prove himself, his bravery in the face of impossible odds. He remembered its last transmission, calm and clear even as his ship was torn apart. Human vessel clear. Mission successful. He had thought those words were enough. Now he understood they were not. Deserved more than a successful mission report. He deserved to be remembered as more than a casualty. He deserved his name spoken, his life honored, his absence acknowledged. Luminance thought of colleagues from centuries past. Shards she had worked with, fought beside, created beauty alongside. She had thought of them as fragments that returned to the whole, but they were more than that. They were individuals with unique perspectives, irreplaceable combinations of experience and wisdom. When they shattered, something truly unique was lost to the universe. She had moved on too quickly. She had forgotten that loss needed acknowledgement before healing could begin. A young human private named no relation to the ambassador stood before the wall and looked at her father's name. He had died when she was 5 in a medical research accident on Mars. She barely remembered him, but she was here in his place, serving as he had served. She touched his name on the wall and whispered, "I'm here, Dad, I'm here." The 2 minutes stretched. To some, it felt like an eternity. To others, it passed too quickly. But for those 2 minutes, the galaxy acknowledged something fundamental, that life was precious, that death mattered, that loss deserved recognition. For 2 minutes, the entire civilization stopped its endless forward momentum to look back, to remember, to grieve. Then a single note rang out, a human instrument called a trumpet playing an ancient melody called taps. The mournful notes echoed through the memorial gardens, broadcast across every Union channel. It was a song of ending, of peace, of release. It was a song that said, "Rest now, your duty is done, you will be remembered." The final note faded away. The silence broke gently, like dawn breaking over a quiet world. People began to move again, to breathe fully, to speak in hushed voices. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in the collective consciousness of the Galactic Union. Commander approached Ambassador. His translator struggled with the emotion in his voice. "Ambassador, we celebrate our fallen because to grieve them would mean accepting they are truly gone. But they are gone, aren't they? And you humans have the courage to face that, to say their names, to let them be dead but not forgotten." "Yes," said simply. "They're gone, and it hurts. It will always hurt. That's how we know it mattered." Luminance drifted over to join them. "In my 4,000 years, I have seen millions pass. I remember none of their names. You humans, with your brief decades, remember them all. Perhaps this is not about the length of life, but the depth of it. You pack more meaning into your short years than I have found in my long centuries." "We have to," said. "We don't have time to waste. We don't have centuries to figure things out. So we love harder, fight harder, remember harder, because it's all we have." A representative flowed over. "The collective has been discussing what we experience today. We are in disagreement, which is unusual for us. Some believe this grief is inefficient, that it serves no purpose. But others, most of us, believe we have been missing something essential. We have been so focused on consciousness continuation that we forgot to honor the individual consciousness before it joined the collective. We forgot that even within our joined minds, we are each unique. Your ceremony has reminded us of this." More delegates approached, each sharing similar thoughts. Species that had never considered memorials were now talking about creating their own. They were designing a floating garden to honor their lost members. They were programming a mathematical proof that would bear the names of their researchers. They were commissioning a battle monument that would list warriors by name, not just by victory. The memorial wall had inspired something that spread across the galaxy. Not just a wall, but an idea. That the dead deserved recognition, that their names mattered, that grief was not weakness but wisdom, that remembrance was not dwelling on the past but honoring it. In the days and weeks that followed, the annual Memorial Day ceremony became a permanent fixture of the Galactic Union calendar. Other species added their own days of remembrance, each with their own traditions and customs. But they all included the 2 minutes of silence, broadcast across all Union space. For 2 minutes, once a year, the galaxy stopped rushing forward to acknowledge where it had been, who it had lost, what it had cost to build their civilization. The memorial wall on Unity Station grew. It became a pilgrimage site, a place where beings from across the galaxy came to remember their dead. New sections were added constantly as more species contributed names, as more individuals were lost in service, as the shared history of the Union was written in the lives of those who built it. Human tour guides led groups through the memorial, explaining the significance of different sections, helping visitors find specific names, sharing stories of those who had fallen. These guides became unofficial historians, keepers of memory, bridges between species and cultures. Private Martinez, the young guard who had helped to find their sibling's name, became the chief guide of the memorial. She learned dozens of languages and cultural practices. She could tell you about honor traditions and shard reformation ceremonies. She knew which flowers were traditional for mourning and what colors they used to represent loss. She made it her mission to ensure that every visitor to the memorial left with a deeper understanding of sacrifice and service. One day, an elderly visited the memorial. He was bent with age, his 4 arms trembling slightly. He asked Martinez to help him find a name. "My son," he said, "warrior scout, he died. I do not remember how long ago. I am ashamed that I do not remember." Martinez led him to his name gently. 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days ago," she said. "He died protecting a human cargo vessel from pirates. His actions saved 43 lives." The old touched his son's name with a shaking hand. "I thought I had honored him by not grieving. I thought grief was weakness. But I see now that I dishonored him by forgetting, by moving on too quickly." "You're here now," Martinez said. "That's what matters, you remember now." "Because humans taught us to remember," the old said. "Because you had the courage to grieve and the wisdom to honor your dead and the strength to carry that burden. We thought we were the warriors, the strong ones, but you humans carry a weight we never imagined. The weight of memory, the weight of loss, the weight of love that persists past death." He stood there for a long time, his hand on his son's name, finally allowing himself to grieve. Martinez stood with him as she had stood with countless others. This was her duty now, not to prevent grief but to witness it, not to ease the pain but to acknowledge it, not to help people forget but to help them remember. As the old finally left, Martinez returned to the beginning of the memorial wall, to the first name carved there, Ambassador Way's brother, David. He had been the first human casualty in Union service, killed before humanity even knew how dangerous this new frontier would be. But he wasn't just the first. He was a brother, a son, a friend. He was a person who had mattered, who had been loved, who was missed. Martinez touched his name as she did every day. "We're teaching them, David," she whispered. "Slowly, but we're teaching them. That life matters, that death matters, that remembering is not weakness but strength, that grief is the price of love and it's worth paying." Above her, through the transparent dome, the stars shone down. Ships moved between them, carrying the living forward into the future. But here, in this garden of memory, the past was honored. The fallen were remembered. Their names were spoken, carved in stone, preserved forever. The galaxy had learned to grieve. And in learning to grieve, they learned something more important. They learned to truly value life. Because if you cannot mourn the dead, you cannot properly honor the living. If you cannot acknowledge loss, you cannot appreciate what you have. If you cannot remember sacrifice, you cannot understand the cost of what you've built. Humanity had given the galaxy a gift, not technology or weapons or territory, something more precious, the understanding that those who serve deserve to be remembered, not because they were perfect, not because they succeeded, but because they tried, because they stood when they could have run, because they gave everything and in return they